Hafa and welcome back to Challenge the Status Quo. My name is Melvin Wonpat Borja. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission on Decolonization. This show is brought to you by COD and our friends over at Glimpses. Welcome back for another round of community conversation and discussion around political status. We've got some cool content coming up for you today, and I'm pretty stoked about it. Shout out to Paulie, Suba, and Dice. These guys ambushed me out here in the hallway. Like, hey, can you come on real quick? We want to talk about Organic Act. But thank you, Paulie and Dice, for welcoming me. It's always nice to talk about these issues that were faced here in Guam. But in particular, when the community is involved in something, and of course last week we were celebrating, commemorating, recognizing the 75th anniversary of the Organic Act of Guam, which in a lot of ways was a double-edged sword, was a very tricky thing to navigate. But both good and bad. Here we are 75 years later, still in pursuit of a full measure of self-government. So shout out to Paulie and Dice for bringing me on, and thanks, Paulie, of course, for keeping the conversation critical. I love it. I hope everybody had a great weekend. It was a little bit rainy, but Sunday was nice. Yesterday was really nice. I got a chance to take my family to the beach. Always a fun thing. We went up to La Texan, and then we had our obligatory conversation on the surface danger zone. You gotta laugh it off, otherwise it's gonna hurt way more. If you haven't been up to La Texan, I highly recommend it. La Texan has got a really interesting history, but it has been open to the public for a few years now. Of course, you got to go when U.S. Fish and Wildlife has the preserve open, but I want to say it's early, like 8 a.m., maybe a little earlier, and then they close at 4. But if you get a chance, if you haven't been up there, I highly recommend it. You just take a NCS road, like you're going to GRMC, and go all the way down until you reach the golf course, and then hang a left, and then you just go straight down. You'll come into another gate. Lots of gates along the way to remind you what time it is. But yeah, it's La Texan is part of the surface danger zone. So every time we take our kids down, we always have the conversation. Isn't this beautiful? Don't you love this beach? My girl's like, I love this beach so much, Dad. It's so nice. The sand here is so great. And it's so beautiful. Why they got barbed wire over there? Well, baby, that's because that area is what they call the surface danger zone. And this last trip, she was like, what is that? It's so beautiful. She's looking up at the rock, the cliff line, right? When we're coming back out and going back up the hill. She's looking up at the cliff line. She's like, that's so beautiful. What is up there? It's like, well, a long time ago, what was up there was a beautiful limestone forest. And today, there's a small arms firing range operated by the U.S. Marine Corps. It's tough. And so, it's the La Texan area is obviously a very culturally significant place. But it's also a really, beautiful, just a beautiful place to be. I personally think it's one of the best beaches on Guam. Like, it's not even close. Gap Gap too. I have these weird, like little slivers of memory from when I was a kid of Gap Gap, because I used to go there when I was a kid. My Nino, my dad's brother, was retired from the Navy, and so we used to get hooked up, and he would take us into Gap Gap. And my Nino was totally one of those guys that would like spear a Gumpson and Gap Gap, and the military police would come through and be like, "Hey, you're not allowed to fish here," and he's one of these Chamorros like, "Huh? You don't get to tell me where I fish, boy." But that's like one of my core memories as a kid. I was just talking to my first cousins not too long ago. They live in the States now, but I was telling them how that's one of the things that I always remember from about Gap Gap when I was a kid. Was one of these times we went down to Gap Gap with my Nino, and he actually caught a gumson, and so he's walking out of the water with it. It's already dead, and this MP comes and starts getting really upset at him, right? Telling me, you can't fish here. And so my Nino starts going off like, what do you want me to do? You want me to throw this thing back? It's dead already. And my Nino was already getting like irate. He was ready to fight. And my Nino is like this really big, imposing guy. And so I immediately just felt sorry for this MP that was about to get it. But I remember being super scared. I was like super scared. I was just a little boy. I was like, oh my God, my Nino's about to kill somebody. Somebody get my dad. I can't hold him back. But it's just crazy how like Gap Gap Beach is just this beautiful, beautiful place that so many people on Guam just have no memory of, or no concept of. They've never even seen it. They don't even know that something that beautiful is like right next door. Like all those people who live in that village or the surrounding villages, that's your region beach, man. That's supposed to be like your regular weekend pick. But it's just so inaccessible. And that I think is the awesome thing about La Texan, right? Is that La Texan it represents this place where, we've had this cultural memory restored. I know I'm getting all hippie and getting all feely about it. That's right. I'm doing it. Go hug a native tree after this. I'll see you outside. Shout out to Raw Dudes on our stream on Instagram. And yes, we have to also mention Hinapsen. I know Raw Dude takes this one personal. This is the one that we're gonna argue about. And where is the most beautiful beach on Guam? And all the Hinapsen family clans that are connected to there are gonna be like, no, it's Hinapsen, guarantee. Which is also, I have to share since we're on it. Thanks, Radu, for bringing this up for me. I personally love going to Hinapsen. You know what's my favorite part about Hinapsen? It's beautiful, hands down, no question. I'm not, we're not gonna get into the aesthetic debate right now. But one thing that I love about Hinapsen above all other beaches and beach experience is when you go up there. You've been up, right, Reese, to Hinapsen, the one up north?
Wow, you're gonna have to count me as maybe one of those who hasn't.
This is the one that's on base, so you have to go on base to get in there. But it's not. This is one that was the family owners. They worked the arrangement with the federal government, so now they have access.
Okay.
So like the families, they don't have to. They still got to go through the gate, but they have their own access, like their own pass.
Wow.
But when they get in, right, my favorite thing is that you have to go through the military side of the beach.
Okay.
But there's this clear like property line.
Oh.
Where the family's property begins and the military's property ends.
Yeah.
But in order to get to that point, you have to go through the main gate, right? Mm-hmm. But when you get to that property line, they have a sign there that says private property, no U.S. military personnel beyond this point.
Mm-hmm. What a nice sign to have.
Yeah,
that's probably the first sign I ever heard of seen of that.
This is why I gotta thank Raju for bringing this up, because every time I go there, and I swear I gotta have like 15 lost pictures of that sign. Like every time I go, I've seen it. I've taken pictures of it. I just always, it's like my obligatory stop. It's like, hold on, guys, I got to take a picture of this sign. Mm-hmm. It's my favorite sign on Guam. Let me get a selfie with this.
I love that.
This sign, this no trespassing sign. Mm-hmm. Usually we're the trespassers.
That's right.
We're normally the trespassers, and for once, we're being recognized as we're the rightful people. It's not even my family, and I'm just over here like, yeah, I'm with them.
Yeah.
I'm with them. Shout out to the families, the clans that are connected to Hinapsen and that history, and their undying advocacy. I mean, it's one of the things that I gotta say is it's unfortunate. It's awesome for those families, and it's also kind of sad that that's not the norm. I always thought that that's what it should be, like it's undeniable, right? It's undeniable this family's claim to this land, and it's undeniable the connection of the family to that land and what that means to their family. And it's not, to me, I know it's easy to kind of get caught up and be like, this land is just money. This land is worth so much, and so it change everybody's life, because if they could sell it, then they'd be rich. But I don't, it's not, to me, it's not about the monetary value of the money of the land. It's about what does that land mean to these people, and how does it keep them connected to this place? And so I always thought that should be the baseline, right? That kind of understanding and work and relationship with the family by the military, needs to be set at a higher precedent, so that's the baseline. And it's not perfect, no doubt about it. I mean, how it took decades for that family to figure out how to come to a compromise with the U.S. military and access to their land. It's not like, it's not like they're asking for anything unreasonable. I mean, if you go to Hinapsen, you go to any of these like big private properties that are near or in inaccessible without going through federal property. None of these people are like parceling off their property and like making their millions. You know what I mean? Like, most of these people have ranches at their properties. I think the one exception is probably Urunau, or like what is it? The Cocoa Palm Resort, which was kind of, also is very problematic. That's the Artero family. And so, they built a business to, create this revenue stream for their family, and have visitors come and spend the day at their beach resort. But now that there's, it's in the surface danger zone, there's no, there will be inhibited access, which obviously, changes the whole business model. But that's, I think, the one exception. Like, most of these properties that were finally, given back to the families, or the families finally got access to them. That's what they do there. They go there, they fish, they camp, they hang out, enjoy the peaceful sounds of nature, reconnect with our history and our culture. I mean, it's kind of hard to be like, no, you can't, because, national security. Anyhow, that is not even what we're here to talk about today. My crew's on the air, right? And my crew's listening to this right now, being like, man, look, I can see all of those notes right in front of you that we worked so hard on. Look at all that prep, and you're just going off on a tangent about land for the last 20 minutes.
It's very good. My favorite part is the sign.
It's Monday. I'm feeling it out. We're going with the flow here. But what we did, to digress, what we did talk about, or what we did plan for today, was I wanted to talk about this landmark decision at the International Court of Justice on climate change. There was a ruling. Let's backtrack, because I don't know if everybody is familiar. Let's do a real quick, like, one hitter. The International Court of Justice, also known as the ICJ, is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. It was established in June 1945 through the Charter of the UN, and officially began its work in April of 1946. The seat of the court is at the Peace Palace in The Hague, which is in the Netherlands. So the role of the ICJ is to settle in accordance with international law any legal disputes submitted to it by states. States means like a nation, right? So any disputes submitted to it by states or nations to give advisory opinions on legal questions referred to it by authorized United Nations organs and specialized agencies. So basically what the International Court of Justice is not, nothing that the International Court of Justice does is necessarily legally binding, right? Because the whole point is to have an international body comprised of, different nations, right? Different nations have representation in the ICJ. And it's meant to kind of give this global opinion, an international opinion. And so when two nations or multiple nations have a dispute, they have a disagreement, the ICJ is built to kind of weigh in and say this is the way that we understand international laws that are applied to all the nations of the world. And then usually what happens is that nations will use those advisory opinions to inform or help make their arguments in a legally binding court. So, for example, if let's say the Marshall Islands, right? Marshall Islands climate change champion. Let's say the Marshall Islands decided that they wanted to sue the U.S. government on the impact, their contribution to climate change and the impact on the Marshall Islands. If that case was taken up in the U.S. Supreme Court, then I would imagine that the reps from the Marshall Islands would use the International Court of Justice ruling to influence their argument. So it's not, the ICJ is not going to say, oh, you country A, you broke the law, so now your whole country go to jail or something like that. That's not what the ICJ is built to do. Nonetheless, the ICJ and the legal opinions that are issued by the ICJ, I think, are very significant because what they represent is a shift in public perception and a shift in policy, right? In international policy, the way that governments all over the world kind of see themselves and see other nations. The ICJ is composed of 15 judges who are elected for terms of office of 9 years by the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council. So recently there was a case that was brought to the ICJ regarding the obligations of states in respect to climate change. So in 2019, this was all kind of brought to fruition by a group of law students from Vanuatu who sought an opinion from the ICJ on the, quote, legal obligations of states to prevent climate change, end quote. Vanuatu provided the students with diplomatic support and helped to create a global coalition. And so eventually this, with the support of Vanuatu, the Vanuatuan government, the Blue Ocean Law, which is a locally based law firm headed by the fabulous attorney Julian Uggen, who also represented Guam in the Davis case. Blue Ocean Law took this thing on, and they were able to elevate it to the International Court of Justice. So on March 29th, 2024, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 22-276. The resolution referred to Article 65 of the United Nations Charter, which allows the Economic and Social Council to furnish information to the Security Council and assist the Security Council. So prior to the passage of the resolution, Vanuatu led a coalition of 132 nations pushing for the United Nations General Assembly to adopt the resolution, requesting an advisory opinion from the ICJ. This was a pretty was a monumental moment in the sense that when this request was sent up to the ICJ, it got unanimous support at the United Nations. which is amazing. In April 12th of 2024, the United Nations Secretary General transmitted a letter of request to the ICJ for the advisory opinion. And then from April through December 2024 was the written phase of the ICJ proceedings. So 91 written statements and 62 written comments were filed in the registry by states and international organizations. And then later in December, the ICJ held public hearings. And so there was a lot of great participation in the public hearings. And eventually, in July 23rd of this year, an advisory opinion was noticed or issued by the ICJ on the obligations of states in respect of climate change. Notably, out of the 29 advisory opinions the ICJ has issued during its 85-year history, this is only the fifth unanimous opinion. And this is the amazing thing, right? Is that just like any other body, it's rare that you get everybody just say, "This is it. We absolutely agree with this." Every single one of us is resolved that this is what it is, and this is only the fifth time in 85 years. This is only the fifth time that the ICJ has unanimously supported an opinion, which is awesome. And I think it says a lot. And this is why, even though the opinion issued by the ICJ may not be legally binding, it's nonetheless significant because it gives you a good idea of where the world's at right now. You know, it's these people are all kind of, tied to their home origin loyalty, right? And then they're also tied to their professional obligation to the United Nations. But, even people who work at the United Nations, you always kind of give a little bit extra for your home team, right? It's kind of human nature. And so, I think it's very telling of where we are as a society today and the way that the perspective of the world is changing, which, I think it's an exciting thing. It wasn't that long ago that we were just like, there's still a lot of people who are debating whether or not, climate change is a real thing. Like, are there really melting polar ice caps? Are polar bears really dying out there? Is this just a myth? I mean, these are the same people who are like, these are all the flat earthers. That's the one that gets me, man. I can understand. I can really understand how you can kind of just create this even if it's false, it's false rationale that climate change could be a myth. That, it makes sense to me. It makes sense how somebody would be like, yeah, I think we can pull this one off and convince people that this is just a hoax. But the flat earth one, man, I'm just like, for real? First of all, you guys already rammed the Christopher Columbus narrative down our throats. And now you're going to change your mind? Make up your mind. Which is it, man? I can't. This is why I can't be this is why they only give me one day a week, guys. 1 day a week. Because any more of this, and I'm just going to start going off on a tangent. Don't give Melvin too much free reign. Limited free reign. You got to dial him back every now and then. That's why they sent Reese. Reese will keep me on track, but in a very friendly and polite way. You know what I mean?
I feel like I'm an enabler.
Oh.
If you start throwing, I'm throwing with you.
You guys sent the wrong person to police me.
It's like, oh,
where's
no.
Kyle at? Kyle,
please.
Kyle, we're about to start a riot in here.
Bro, if you go, I go. I'm loyal.
That's how we do, man. It's native solidarity right there. This is a talk show. This is not just me and Reese talking to each other, even though I could definitely talk to Reese for 2 hours nonstop, as I've shown. But if you would like to get involved in the discussion, the number is 922-1051. or 922-1052. The 1051 number is our WhatsApp number. Shout out to our peoples listening on the Instagram Live and on the Wave YouTube channel. And as far as I know, our radio land frequency is kicking butt today. We had some technical issues last week, but we got through it. Our community was like, we went full like tsunami watch on this one. All of our peeps was calling us and texting us. Oh, the radio's down, man. It's down. I'm on the Instagram. Oh, it's back on. You're good to go.
Thank you guys.
Thanks,
so
guys.
much.
We appreciate you guys. I'm totally going. I'm digressing a bunch today. I'm just on it. Going back to the some of the highlights of this ICJ opinion. For resolution 77-276, the UN General Assembly cited Article 96 of the UN Charter to request the ICJ's opinion on advisory opinion on this issue, right? So the question was, what are the obligations of states under international law to ensure the protection of the climate system and other parts of the environment from anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases for states and for present and future generations? What are the legal consequences under these obligations for states where they, by their acts and omissions, have caused significant harm to the climate system and other parts of the environment with respects to states, including, in particular, small island developing states, which, due to their geographical circumstances and level of development, are injured or specifically affected by or are particularly vulnerable to adverse effects of climate change, and peoples and individuals of the present and future generations affected by the adverse effects of climate change. So, you know, I know this is a lot of like legal language. The simple version of this is that the ruling now is saying that states, nations have an obligation. So, you know, of course, this is not a lot of the challenge, I think, especially in the U.S. system, is corporations, right? Large companies. I was just watching the response to this ruling, and there are already these sustainability business experts, right, who are kind of weighing in on what this means on policy, business policy, and law, especially in the United States. And one of the things that they're talking about is that in the past, corporate law is pretty clear, right, and is actually pretty uniform internationally. But corporate law, you know, CEOs, right, the head of the company, directors, their obligation, their mandate is to make money for the company, period. And it's pretty cut and dry, right? Your job is to increase profits so that the company makes more money. And they, for generations, have kind of just done this unwatched, unchecked. And in the past, right, the mindset was, well, we just have to bring down the cost of production so that our profits are higher. When we turn around and we sell, our profit margin is greater. And in order to bring down the cost of production, they do all kinds of questionable stuff, like, you know, cut down the rainforests and use child labor and sweatshops and unfair working conditions and not pay a livable wage and blah, 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 blah. And so already there are these, the response to the ICJ is that there's this ongoing conversation now with, you know, these business experts who also have, you know, an eye out, a mind for sustainability, right? And they're environmentally conscious. And what they're saying is that corporate law just needs to evolve, that it's a simple shift in saying your director's mandate is still to make increase profit, make money for the company, but not at the expense of the environment, not at the expense of, you know, these other nations that are adversely affected by degradation of the environment. And so, you know, of course, this is huge, right? It's just a few more words in the language of corporate law. But, you know, corporate law, even though they're not not like governments, right? Governments often, always, try to find a way to regulate corporate activity and business activity, and we see it in a number of different ways. Right now, our ongoing conversation is BPT, right? To or not to roll back BPT is the question in Guam. But I think that, and don't get me wrong, guys, like if you're a business owner out there, I'm not trying to like minimize the impact or the importance of this particular issue. But, what I'm saying is that we're still running at this very kind of, at this low level, right? It's a small perspective when it comes to our business policy. And that's because we're not making the decisions, these overarching decisions that the federal government makes. Federal government, finds its way to regulate and control all kinds of business all the time. I mean, you could make that argument about cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is just this huge movement now internationally. And it's, I believe, I'm not a crypto expert, but I believe that cryptocurrency is just the evolution of currency. Currency is just like it's like a universal mechanism, right, to facilitate trade. In the past, if I'm a fisherman and I need sweet potato, I go and I trade my fish for sweet potato. But what if the sweet potato farmer doesn't need fish because he already got it? What he wants is wood. So then I go and I trade my fish to a guy who has lumber, and then I take that lumber and then I trade it with the sweet potato farmer. And so instead of that, all we're doing now is we use currency, and currency obviously is different in different countries. Ours is we use the U.S. currency. That paper money is supposed to it's not exactly cut and dry like the way it used to be with Fort Knox and the gold, but that's what it was, right? That every dollar in circulation was a representation of the amount of gold in Fort Knox. And so that's what makes your paper money not just paper, right? Is it's backed by gold. So it has value. And it's just, it's just a trade mechanism. And so I always thought that cryptocurrency is just the evolution of currency, because the global perspective is expanding. Business is happening across farther stretches of space and time. And so, we need a mechanism to facilitate trade at a large scale. But the reason why, Bitcoin in particular is not, really gone to its full form, I guess you could say, is because the federal government wants to regulate it. The federal government doesn't like Bitcoin because it allows too much opportunity for black market transactions, which is, I think, understandable, right? The whole point of Bitcoin was to decentralize the money, was to make it where it's just user to user, really just facilitated by technology rather than facilitated through a bank that's going to take their cut and then send your transaction for transparency and accountability to the federal government to ensure that you're not laundering money or doing anything illegal. But if you look at what's happening now in the United States, there's individual states that have already started to authorize the purchasing of cryptocurrency or the use of cryptocurrency as part of their, state treasury. And so I think it's just evolving. But what the point I'm trying to make is that there's the federal governments and the U.S. federal government no different. Governments will always try to find a way to regulate business, right, and to control business in a certain way. And usually the idea is that the businesses are supposed to be accountable to your values, right? There's certain things that you want to happen in your place where you live and in your environment, and things that you don't want to have happen. And so you create regulations. You're only allowed to do these things at these times, or do this thing in this way. You can't just burn your trash. We want you to recycle. And that's, it's a shift that we're starting to see. And so I really feel like this is an exciting moment for the world, because now the governments of the world are saying, yes, governments should be accountable and they should be held responsible if they're not regulating the way that business is being done in their communities, or how businesses are operating that are based in their countries. And so I think it's a really interesting thing, because basically what this is doing is that this is saying that it is a government, a nation's obligation to ensure that we are all taking necessary steps to protect the environment and to acknowledge and combat climate change. But it's also saying that states can be held accountable, that nations can be held accountable. And so what this is doing is that this is further empowering small island nations who, are disproportionately affected by climate change. They don't burn the amount of fossil fuels. They don't contaminate the environment in the same way that large nations do, but they feel the impact in a much greater disparity, right? The Marshall Islands is, one of the front runners in this global fight against climate change. And a lot of their motivation is the reality that their islands are sinking, right? As sea level is rising, their islands are disappearing. One of the other interesting things is that there was another ICJ opinion that acknowledged the political identity of states. And this one was a really interesting one. I got to get the reference for this, but I'll find it. I'll let you know. But I don't recall it off the top of my head. But basically what they're saying was that even if a nation is disappearing, that they're already established in the international framework. So a place like Tuvalu, for example, right? Tuvalu is an atoll island. So it's drastically being impacted by rising sea level, and it could be completely underwater in just a matter of decades, similar to Marshall Islands. And so this other ICJ opinion is basically saying that even if that were to happen, even if Tuvalu or Marshall Islands was to go completely underwater, that doesn't mean that the nation of Tuvalu or the nation of the Marshall Islands just disappears, that there's still a nation, right? That they still have rights, which is I think that's it. It's kind of like, it should be just logical, but come on, guys. That there are places out there that are like, man, if these guys could just go underwater and we don't have to deal with this anymore, it'd be great. But that's off the table now, right? Like, you have to acknowledge it. What it's doing now is forcing the world to reckon with this problem. No matter how the problem evolves, or no matter how the situation changes, whether these islands, there's mitigation to save the islands and to protect them, or if they just end up completely submerged, they still have a national identity and they still have a stake and a claim, which is a really exciting thing, because what it's doing now is it's shifting the power dynamic. In the past, corporations, the power follows the money. And so, of course, these small developing islands are not the big power players in the global economy or in global politics. But now that power dynamic is being challenged, because now, these impacts have to be acknowledged and they have to be reckoned with. And I think it's a super exciting thing. And obviously there are a lot of different there are a lot of implications. There are a lot of ways that this will have a rippling effect on a lot of these other conversations, a lot of these other challenges that we face globally, particularly for Pacific Islanders. I think it's a landmark decision, and that Pacific Islanders everywhere should be celebrating this. It's monumental. And shout out to Julian Uggen and Blue Ocean Law for doing the thing. Julian is just becoming a bigger and bigger rock star as we speak. He was already pretty cool in my book. Representing us on the Davis case was pretty gangster, in my opinion. And then he turned around and wrote a book of poetry that was like an award-winning book of poetry. And I was just like, just stop it. Just stop it. Why do you have to be so cool all the time? You can't just be smart and articulate. Now you got to be artful and stuff. Come on, man. Jeez. You're making us all look bad by comparison. Making us all look great by representing Guam. Yeah. But making us all look bad by comparison, man. Jeez. I got to go. Let's go publish a book, Reese. Okay. Somebody call Lola Leon Guerrero.
Please.
Somebody call Lola over at UOG Press. Me and Reese, we're going to make us a book,
We're
too.
ready.
We're ready. Mm-hmm. Get us a book. Get me a book deal.
I'm just thinking about what the book would be about. Like,
I think it would be...
Ooh, I got one. Since I'm here on radio, I should from here on out take note of all the people that call and maybe make a book on that. Like,
man, we're totally on the same page right now. I was thinking that it would be like the unfiltered conversations of like all the radio, all the harassing callers.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll do like 2 volumes. One volume will be the callers that are super cool and that, really add color and context to the conversation and make this thing, this beautiful idea that it's supposed to be talk radio. And then the other book will be for the trolls.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're just going to eat them up.
I love that. Yes, that's our book.
Yep.
Lola, where are you?
Give us a deal.
Please, Lola.
Radu said that he would read it. I just saw in the comments. Radu said,
Period.
Make that book. I would read it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
There you go. We got one cell.
Take me to the beach.
Take us to the beach. Let us get a picture of the sign.
Please.
I want that to be my job. I want to be a security guard at Hinapsan.
Ooh.
Radu, talk to the family, man.
Nah, that just sounds
my rate is pretty low.
Sounds like the best groundkeeping job you could ever have.
For real. Like, I want to be the guy that's at the sign.
Just patrolling, making sure, right? You see the military guys with their patrol and you're on patrol and you're like, better make sure you don't come close.
I just want to try asking military personnel to see their ID. Whoa, bro. I need to see your ID.
That doesn't look like a Guam ID.
I need to see your ID. I remember somebody was making that joke. There was there's this whole like debate going on about the military and the base access and the public roadways and all of this. And somebody came out, like I think it was one of the elected officials came out and was like, we should just put up our own checkpoint,
like a toll booth.
Yeah, toll booth right outside the gate.
Stop. There's the gate. They come out and then they have to check in with a
local
toll booth.
Yep.
And let me see your ID to make sure you can come back out.
You gonna check our ID? We're gonna check your ID.
I mean, it might cause a lot more traffic at the bases, but
it would only be inside the base, though. That's the only.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, the traffic would be not our problem.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Like, man, hey, we're just trying to be self-governing, man. You could have worked this out another way. We could have worked.
Stop. What if like, how on the base you cannot go in at certain times if they're under a certain watch? What if they can't get out? What if it's the opposite? Like, sorry, we're under a core or whatever thing. You have to stay inside your base. So sorry. I think that'll be interesting.
It would be great.
Turn to the tables.
But yeah, Radu says that he's gonna put me in the application list. Talk to the family, bro. Talk to the family. Let me know.
Yeah, can we like get like a, what do you call that? The visitor pass? Can you give us visitor pass? I'm gonna walk around the border right by that sign. I'm gonna have me like a hegem and a sling stone. Yeah.
Just one sling stone. Yeah, because I'm not trying to.
You don't want to look like
I'm not trying to be too intimidating.
Yeah. Just one, because that's all you need, Nay.
I need to get on my physical fitness so I can be like the super ripped, and I'm gonna rock. My uniform is gonna be a Saudi, and I need me like a huge Sanahi, like the one that QUO wears, or my Pari Ken Cooper.
And get the giant clam itself.
One of them.
Just put it right
get
there
the
on
clam.
your neck.
I'm just gonna carry the clam everywhere. I'm gonna be checking IDs. I'm be checking on all these people who accidentally walk into Hinapsan. Right. Accidentally. You saw the sign. You read English. Right. You know.
Come on. That's in your own language.
Sir, I'm going to have to escort you out.
You're not supposed to be here on this property.
This is restricted area, sir.
Restricted. Do you not see the sign?
Yep. I'm going to be taking down drones with my slingstone. Yep.
Yes.
Taking
That's
down
how
drones.
Stop. Those drones are so expensive. They're going to be so mad.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to be mad if I lose my slingstone that took me like 8 months to carve into that perfect shape. I'm going to restart the traditional practice of the clay slingstone.
Ooh.
Yeah. Did you know that Chamorros were also use clay slingstones? You know, Chamorros were baking their own pottery, right? So
yeah.
they would also use clay slingstones because they're easier to fashion quicker. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if you miss the bird and you lost it, it's not like a huge tragedy, but
it's like, oh well.
You know, one of those perfect football shaped ones made out of like basalt or something, you know, limestone. Come on, man.
You lose those.
You realize how long it took me to make that thing?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I understand.
Yep. But that's also why they're pretty rare. Like you know, people find slingstones in the jungle all the time, but it's very rare and pretty much almost impossible to find a fully intact clay slingstone. It's awesome.
Wow.
Super cool. If you're not fascinated by a 4,000-year-old cultural history,
what are you doing?
What are you doing, man?
What are you doing?
They can't even make this up on the Disney Channel. They can't. I watched the live action Lilo and Stitch. I got a lot of notes, Reese.
Okay, period.
I got a lot of notes, man.
Got notes.
I do. On the other hand, I also watched Chief of War, which I really enjoyed. And we're going to talk about it.
I've been seeing that on my stream.
Watch it, Reese.
Period?
Watch it.
Okay.
It's good. It's a lot of Pacific Islanders. I'm into it.
No.
Yeah, super.
Yes.
Yeah, even the ones that would like, you know, they got like the white last name, but they're clearly like Polynesian or something. Their middle name is like super long. Yeah, that's the one.
We already know.
Yeah, we know. Anyway, we're at the top of the hour. We got to take a real quick break, but we'll be right back. We're going to try to connect this ICJ business to some of what's going on here, particularly the final EIS for the missile defense system was released not too long ago. Stay with us.
FM Daddy Do. The talk of Guam is Wave 105 FM.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Matt Piper. Smoke from Canadian wildfires is still hovering over some Midwestern states, bringing warnings of unhealthy air. Air quality alerts have been in effect in 11 states this weekend, and New York City has already issued one for tomorrow. National Weather Service meteorologist Bob Oravec.
Going forward, it looks like that same general pattern of the flow out of the west-northwest across the northern tier of the country, southern portions of Canada is going to continue for the next week or more. So it looks like we're probably going to have more smoke moving from Canada into the northern tier of the United States.
Authorities say a former U.S. soldier suspected of killing 4 people at a Montana bar is still at large and believed to be armed. The shooting happened Friday morning at the Al Bar in Anaconda, Montana. State Attorney General Austin Knudsen.
We believe this is an armed and extremely dangerous individual. I'm going to ask the public to be vigilant. This is still Montana. Montanans know how to take care of themselves. But please, if you have any sightings, call 911. If you see anything that looks out of the ordinary, strange, call 911.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has asked the International Committee of the Red Cross to deliver food and medical assistance to Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Linda Gradstein is in Jerusalem.
2 Hamas propaganda clips released over the past few days show 2 Israeli hostages of the 20 still believed to be alive, emaciated and weak. The International Committee of the Red Cross issued a statement that hostages must urgently receive the medical care and attention they require and repeated their call to be allowed access. Netanyahu said the videos show that Hamas does not want a ceasefire deal and that they strengthened his resolve to eliminate the terrorist group.
An odd find in New Zealand. A woman is under arrest after a child was found in her luggage. The BBC's Celia Hatton has that.
The arrest took place at a rest stop for long-distance bus travelers in the town of QUO. A female passenger had asked the bus driver if she could access her luggage, which had been stored in the bottom of the bus during the first part of their journey. The driver then noticed the woman's suitcase was moving. When he opened it, he discovered the 2-year-old girl curled up inside, alive but extremely overheated.
A whale is dead after getting hit by a boat, and it was all caught on video.
Stay here, stay here. Oh my God, they're going over. Oh, man overboard. Shut the motor off. Shut the motor off.
It happened in Barnegat Bay along the Jersey Shore. The person who fell overboard was able to get back inside the boat. Officials say it was a minke whale about 20 feet long that was killed by the propeller. This is CBS News.
Sponsored by Progressive Insurance. Get renter's insurance to protect the things that make your place a home, including coverage for theft or damage. Visit Progressive.com.
Do you know how America became the best country on God's green earth? We made things, from automobiles to airplanes to textiles. We were the manufacturing epicenter of the world, the innovators that every other country turned to. I'm Katie Lyon, co-founder of Allegiance Flag Supply, and I'm here to tell you that the American spirit is alive and well at Allegiance, where we make American flags 100% in America. When you fly your American flag from Allegiance Flag Supply, you're not just honoring our country, you're supporting American men and women who proudly make the highest quality American flags, period. True patriots who put care into every stitch. See our full story at showallegiance.com and learn about our 100% American-based supply chain. Fly your flag from showallegiance.com with pride, because every flag says manufacturing is still alive and well in the U.S. and we are still the greatest country. Save $35 on your American flag set when you go to showallegiance.com.
New plane seats from a lab in Colorado could change the way wheelchairs are used by plane.
For motorized wheelchair user Curtis Wolf, flying is no fun.
I got to really plan for it. A lot of extra cost, a lot of extra hassle.
Hank Scott at Molden Lab Seating in Golden, Colorado is working on a solution for Curtis and others.
We basically unlock it, slide it across. This is still a fully functioning seat.
In a new design, 2 airline seats become one. The wheelchair slides in and is secured to a plate in the floor.
You can do several rows. So you could have an entire, just say a disabled basketball team. You could have the whole team on one plane.
The lab is in talks with Boeing and major airlines. Steve Kathan, CBS News.
Some rattling after 10 p.m. last night in the Northeast. A 3.0 magnitude quake hit Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, but trembles could be felt in New York City. About 2 seconds of swaying here in Midtown. Matt Piper, CBS News.
The views and opinions expressed in this show are that of the show host, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the staff and management of Wave 105 FM, Glimpses Media, or any of our partners. As we strive to provide quality, respectful, and engaging content, we welcome you to participate in the conversation. Thank you for tuning in to Wave 105 FM, the sound of Guam. Enjoy the show.
Challenge Status Quo here on Wave 105.1 FM is being brought to you by friends over there at Burger King. Don't forget to check out their breakfast melts. That's right, it's back, and you can get that during the breakfast hours. They have the choice of sausage, ham, or bacon. It's available for you at BKU Rule in Agotnia, Tumon, the Micro Mall in the airport.
Yeah, and we are back after the break. Thanks for hanging in there with us. You're listening to Challenge the Status Quo on Wave 105.1 FM. My name is Melvin, Wonpat, Borja. I'm in the studio with Reese, and we are rocking it. It's been a fun show so far, and I've totally been sidetracked a bunch. But it's relevant for the most part. It's relevant.
It's all relevant to the show.
It's relevant and mildly entertaining, you know. It's a little bit of both. We can do a little bit of both. I'm just coming off a high because I had a good weekend. I got to take my kids to the beach. I was telling Reese during the break that I need to, me and my wife concluded that we need to take the kids to the beach more often because they sleep better.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I haven't been there in a minute too, so I'm a little disappointed myself. So hopefully I get to go there. I remember hanging out with a bunch of my friends, and they're always at the beach every Sunday. And it just really felt nice. You know, we really believed in that, like, you know,
Saltwater cleanse.
Saltwater cleanse,
Yep,
getting
I
your
really-
exercise in, just kind of being in that environment. And
I
even
agree.
just sitting at the sand, being next to the ocean is so good. And like you said, for the kids, it's great because they're just tired at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I don't have kids, just nieces and nephews, but you know, we all know.
We know these little terrorists. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I really like about these types of beaches, like, you know, getting outside of like the Tumon experience. And even though, I mean, technically Tumon too is a very culturally significant site, but, you know, obviously Tumon has changed so much. But there is still some cool opportunity for culture in Tumon. Did you know that almost every hotel in Tumon has at some point discovered artifacts, Tomoto artifacts or human remains? And so the law says that especially for anything constructed after 1980, human remains have to be reinterred at the site that they were found or on a proximal site, and then they got to build what we call a naftan, which is basically like a monument. And so almost every hotel in Tumon has one, or they should, if they've discovered, and it's highly unlikely that any hotel in Tumon did not make a discovery. And so some, obviously some naftan are better than others. Some hotels invest in it more, take it more seriously than others. But there are some pretty good ones, like the one over at right above Gun Beach. What is that hotel? What's that new one?
Gun Beach.
The Nico and the other one.
No.
No, not Lotu.
Subaki.
Subaki. There you go. Oh my gosh.
I was like,
that's the one. It's hard to keep up, man. There's so many.
So many.
But yeah, the Subaki Tower up in that area, there's actually a really well maintained naftan. Right before you go down the hill to Gun Beach, it's on your left side. And it's right at the edge of their property, very accessible. Of course, the Hotel Nico has a sizable exhibit. And yeah, Hotel Nico, I think, was kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like, I remember when I was a kid, Hotel Nico construction was very controversial because there was just a high concentration of artifacts and remains discovered in that location. And, for understandable reasons. Tumon, was a major settlement for Tomotos, prior to all of this development. So, but Nico has, built their own exhibit. Like, they have like a display cases and everything. And that, is the product of this partnership between the hotel owners and the government and historic preservation, to, find a way to comply with these laws, these regulations, and do it in a way that is, sensitive and meaningful. Anyhow, we're in the last hour, we were talking about this landmark decision or opinion, advisory opinion issued by the ICJ, or the International Court of Justice, in regard to climate change and nations or states' obligations to protect the environment, or more importantly, to not further degrade the environment at the cost or at the expense of small island nations. Just to kind of go back to some of this context, there was this thing called the Paris Agreement, which basically said that states have an obligation to act with due diligence in taking measures in accordance with their common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities of making an adequate contribution to achieving the temperature goal set out in the agreement. And so the Paris Accords basically was this first kind of formal understanding between large nations that they have this responsibility, they have this obligation. It also includes language that says that they're obligated to pursue measures which are capable of achieving the objectives set out in their successive nationally determined contributions. So basically, each country talks about their contribution to the rising global temperature. There's this undeniable warming of the planet. And each nation obviously contributes to that based on their consumption of fossil fuels and the emissions that they put out into the atmosphere. I think what's notable about this is that the United States signed the treaty on April 22nd of 2016 and ratified it on January 20th of 2021. However, the Trump administration pulled the U.S. out of the treaty this year in January. On January 20th of 2025, the Trump administration pulled the U.S. out of this Paris Agreement treaty. And so the reason why I bring this up is because there's this understanding, right, that there's international understanding that there's a clear impact, that all of these environmental harms are not just imaginary. They're not just ambiguous impacts. That there are very real, tangible impacts that affect people's lives, and particularly people who live in small island nations. And I think it's very interesting to see the pace or the position that the U.S. has taken prior to this decision, following the election of President Trump. The big story out of the Trump administration was the kind of slash and cutting of all this DEI expenses, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if you're one of those that only kind of follows the hysterical stuff, you probably noticed that Elon Musk was like BFFs with Trump, and then now he's out. And if you follow any of this, like they had these fundamental disagreements, right? But one of the big ones that was, I thought, pretty well reported was that President Trump he made these cuts to energy rebates. And a lot of them were for the rebates for purchasing an electric vehicle, which, of course, obviously, right, becomes Elon Musk's business because his company stood to lose a significant amount of money through the decrease of sales. And you kind of see that on the consumer side, right? There was kind of a point where there was a bunch of hybrid and electric vehicles floating around. A lot of people were buying them because though they're expensive, the rebates were significant. And so it was good incentive for a lot of people to change over to a hybrid or an electric vehicle. But now that those rebates are gone, or slashed and cut and gone, it's it's kind of changing the way that U.S. consumers buy stuff and what they prioritize. I think it's very interesting, in particular for Guam, because the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions are significant. The Department of Defense, this is from there was an analysis done by Nita Crawford, who's co-founder of the Cost of War Project at Brown University. And she says that, she asserts that the U.S. became the biggest military emitter and stopped everyone from finding out somehow. She says that the U.S. Department of Defense and Armed Forces is the world's largest institutional greenhouse emitter and accounts for at least 1% of total U.S. emissions annually. And, this is particularly, I think, concerning when you look at the stance that the United States government has taken under the Trump administration. Within the first 100 days of Donald Trump's term, Trump has threatened military action in Panama, Greenland, Mexico, and Canada, and has also dropped bombs on Yemen and increased military sales to Israel. President Trump has promised $1 trillion in defense spending for 2026. And this is happening, amid the unprecedented cuts to almost every other federal agency, including those that research and respond to the climate crisis. I'm not sure what the cuts were to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I know they had some, but their four-wheeler was still jamming at La Texan. I'm not gonna lie, I was totally one of those beach goers that was like, man, stop driving your four-wheeler over here. My kids are here. Did your budget get cut or something? What are you doing out here? Do you have to drive that thing on the beach? Come on, man. But I'm just gonna assume that they're regulating, like making sure people don't like throw their trash and stuff and act a fool on the beach. I'm gonna give you a pass this time, four-wheeler guy. So recently, both former and current U.S. allies have increased their military spending so that their emissions will go up. Emissions are also expected to rise for adversaries and potential adversaries of the U.S. as they also increase military activity. And obviously, there's a bunch of military tension worldwide. But this article that I'm referencing noted that the Pentagon is the largest single fossil fuel consumer in the U.S. and accounts for about 80% of all government emissions. 80%. This is, I think that the implications of this are pretty obvious, right? Especially for a community like Guam. Guam is a highly militarized community. And, this is not just so I don't get me and Reese trolled in the next few minutes. And there's a lot of people out there like, oh, it's the cost of freedom. And hey, man, we're not going to have that particular argument today. But, I mean, you can't deny that Guam is a highly militarized island. It's a third of the island is military base. And there's constant military activity all over the island all year long. Recently, everybody I'm sure noticed that there was this increase in air activity, military air activity, right? They're doing a training. They got all these bomber jets in here. Man, I remember hearing these things just kind of ripping through the sky, and it's intense because I live in Sinahanya, so, and they were operating out of Tizen. And so, we're getting a lot of that flyover traffic, and it is loud. Like, this is not your regular, like, commercial. You kind of get used to the commercial airplane if you live in Sinahanya, but you can tell the difference. It's not even close. Like, commercial airplanes sound like a big machine. A fighter jet, that sound like a machine that is ripping a hole in the sky. Like, it is so intense. And I thought it was rough just kind of being in Sinahanya, but I remember I think we had to take my kids to like a doctor's appointment or something, but somehow we ended up we made a stop at the mobile right outside Tizen, and we just got lucky enough to be there when a couple of these jets were taking off, and holy wow, that was intense. I had like this newfound respect for everybody who lives in MTM. I mean, the whole vehicle was rattling. Like you could feel it's like an earthquake. Like the whole car is just shaking. My kids are just like, what is going on here? My poor boy is just a baby. He's sitting in his rear facing car seat. It's bad enough that he has to have like the Mac flight every time we get I always feel bad for the baby. The baby got to be in the rear facing. Like, why do I always got to go backwards? I'm on a Mac flight here. This is not good. But yeah, I mean, it's so intense. And, you know, I'm not a scientist or anything. I don't know anything about jet technology, but I know they run on fuel. And when you see that thing taking off and the afterburn flying out the back of it, I mean, wow. That's definitely got to cost more to fill up than my truck. That's definitely got to let out something harmful, does it not? I mean, it's fuming back there. And so, you know, I mean, and this is just training, guys. Like, they're just practicing. They're not even blowing stuff up yet. It's just the practice. I mean, it's undeniable that based on the increased military presence on the island, that there will also be an increase in greenhouse emissions and damage to the environment. I mean, it's undeniable, no matter how you spin it. And so I'm going to use this to segue into some of the U.S. military activity in Guam. Recently, the Department of Defense released the final environmental impact statement, or the EIS, for the Enhanced Integrated Air and Missile Defense System, also known as the EIAMD. On May 5th of 2023, there was a notice of intent to prepare the EIS. And then from May 5th to August 18th, 2023, there was a scoping and comment period, which lasted about 105 days. The MDA and U.S. Army held 3 public scoping meetings during this time. And in October of last year, there was a notice of availability of the draft EIS. And then from October 25th to January 8th, the military received public comments and review for 75 days. And then MDA, by the way, is a missile defense agency. MDA and U.S. Army held 2 draft EIS public meetings during this period and made notice of availability of the final EIS, which was released for public review on July 25th. Now the military, or the MDA and Army, will wait a minimum of 30 days before making a decision on the final action. Now, I say all of this because the unfortunate reality for Guam is that Guam does not give our consent. We're not asked for our consent. And this is not about, again, I'm not trying to fight with somebody on, I mean, I guess we could if you really want to. But yeah, I'm not trying to stir it up and get into a debate about, why we do or do not need a missile defense system. It's really not about that. At least not today. Today, all I'm really talking about is the lack of agency that the people of Guam, the government of Guam, has on an action like this. As an unincorporated territory, Guam is not going to ever be asked whether we consent to a military action. And that's fundamentally flawed, right? Because if Guam was fully self-governing, if Guam was either a sovereign state within the United States, if Guam was a freely associated nation in free association with the United States, or if Guam was an independent nation, even if we had an existing, allyship partnership with the United States, it would be required that the United States first gain our consent, that they would ask us, can we build this missile defense system? And we would have to say yes or no. And yes, under only these conditions, which is not what we do. What we do instead is we comment. They tell us, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're not really asking you. We're just telling you this is what we're going to do. What do you think about it? And then we give all of our comments, and then they will try to figure out, okay, how do we do this in a way that's like going to piss you off the least? And this is how we do it, through this process, right? This EIS, environmental impact statement process. And we've done, it's not nothing new to us. We've seen this, done this a bunch of times before. I can tell you, as a professional and even just as a citizen, it's overwhelming and super time consuming. Death by volume is what I like to call it. We did this with the military buildup when it first started, and their EIS at that time was 10,000 pages. And we had a lawsuit in there too. We sued them on the use of Pauget for their firing range, which is now at Letexen, ironically. But this is, and for me, this is the rub, right? Is that it's really less about how much you believe in the effectiveness or the necessity of a missile defense system. It's more about, are we or are we not empowered to make decisions for ourselves, for our community? And I'm definitely not one of these people that's like, I want to be king of Guam. Yeah, I obviously got a lot of opinions. But, I'm not the guy that's going to say, oh, well, I'm smarter than everybody, so I'm just going to impose my opinion on everybody. Let me just help you out here. You're welcome. Though that would be much easier. But, the way I look at it is that if the community overwhelmingly said, this is what we want, and this is how we want to do it, even if I don't agree, I mean, I live in the community. I gotta like get on board with the majority at some point, right? But I think what's really missing is the opportunity to decide that for ourselves, and that's the piece that I feel like we're missing. Let us be the ones. Let us take responsibility to influence and shape the public opinion. I mean, that's what happens in any organized society. Any society that has an organized government is that we campaign. We go out there and we say, hey, this is what I think is right. This is what I think is wrong. And we try to get other people on board so that we speak with a resounding voice. And if we can't organize and get people to support the alternative, then we deserve to lose the public opinion. And if the public opinion says, oh yeah, we should absolutely, take these measures that could very well be damaging to the environment for the sake of, global stability or stabilizing the Indo-Pacific region. Oh man, guys, the Indo-Pacific region rhetoric it does not do it for me, man. I guess so. I think I get triggered when I hear Indo-Pacific. It's become my new trigger word, Indo-Pacific. Like, once you say that, I already know. I already know. And I know how this conversation is going to go. But, I just think that should be the baseline. And it's just kind of ironic to me that we have to constantly argue over dignified treatment. I just don't understand. I don't understand how nobody, how is this copacetic with people? And I know there are people out there who are just like, oh, well, the U.S. knows what's best for us, so we should just let them do what they do. There are absolutely people out there who look at it that way. And I'm just like, come on, man, believe in yourself a little more. You're capable. You're smart enough. You're smart enough. You're good enough. And gosh darn it, people like you. I totally just aged myself with that. I'm aging myself here. I know there's somebody out there who grew up in the 90s and it's like, I remember that from Saturday Night Live and Michael Jordan. You know it. You know it. But yeah, I mean, when I look at this final EIS and just the nature in which it was introduced, and again, love it or hate it, we're not here to argue over the missile defense idea. I'm just going off the principle that, there should be a more transparent discourse here. There should be an opportunity for the people of Guam to make the final decision on what is or is not right for us. And that's just completely void in the conversation. It's completely missing. And so, when you look at the missile defense system, I mean, congressional spending was authorized before we even heard about it. Nobody even knew. This was not on the EIS. This was not a part of the original military buildup EIS. The bulk of the military buildup EIS was on the relocation of these Marines from Okinawa to Japan. Of course, that requires an investment in infrastructure. Oh, man, I'm totally going to get derailed here again. So I was driving out of Letexen, and the family and I were passing by, what's that housing on the right there on NCS Road, the abandoned housing? Like right past GRMC? It's like Finnegod's housing or something like that. Anyhow, I spent a lot of time there as a little kid because one of my aunties lived there, and we used to when I wasn't little, I was like maybe a teenager, but I used to babysit the kids, the little ones, and so we spent a lot of time in that area, right? And it's just funny, like I even meet people people around my age, like, yeah, I remember we used to play. Remember at the housing? I was like, oh yeah, shoot. He's like, just local military families that used to live there. And so I was driving past it, and mind you, we just passed Camp Blas. And Camp Blas is massive. If you haven't seen Camp Blas, and they're not even done yet, they are still rolling. Camp Blas is meant to be the main, what do they call it? Cantonment site? It's housing. It's where they're building the barracks. It's where a majority of the soldiers are supposed to stay. And Camp Blas is a massive property, previously known as Mokfok, right? And so if you look at what they're doing there, I can't help but ask myself, like, what happened to this? Like, that whole area is just like abandoned and decrepit. And they started to like demolish all of the houses there and stuff, but their walls still up. I'm just like, dude, you guys couldn't use this? It's just kind of like, I couldn't help but feel like the response was like, well, why did you do this? Because we can. Because we got the land and we got the money. And we can do whatever we want because you're an unincorporated territory. And it's just tough. It's tough to kind of see the way that all of this is happening. It's such a rapid pace. And, we're just kind of along for the ride, man. I can't help but feel frustrated. Oh, we got some new peeps up on the Instagram feed. Oh, that's my guy. Shout out to Meta Sarmiento. It's my dude out in where are you at now? Oregon? I think he's in Oregon. No, Denver. He's in Denver. And Meta asks, how do we make folks more open to having actual conversations in a way that's inviting and not intimidating? I don't know, man. I feel like I'm pretty intimidating. I'm just kidding. I really feel like the conversation is quickly becoming that. And I think it's just because there's more access, more availability of information. But I think that there's a lot of value or a lot of weight in that question, right? Because I simultaneously agree that when the conversation is intimidating, it dissuades people from participating, or even worse, it makes people ignore the issue. When the conversation is super heated, I mean, nobody wants to just walk into a firing range. No pun intended. But I mean, the more that people engage, the better off we are, and the more the conversation evolves. I was just telling somebody this the other day. Somebody approached me in the community, one of the aunties, and just kind of commented that she really enjoys listening to the show because she feels like she learns a lot, and it makes her feel like she can understand it, and that she understands it better. And it's funny because it's one of my aunties that still thinks like I'm a little crazy.
So you're radical.
Yeah, totally. I'm totally the radical. So auntie was just like, "Now, boy, I still don't agree with everything that you say." But I definitely understand it, and I agree a lot more with you a lot more on things that I didn't think I would agree with you on. And I really appreciated that. And I made this comment to her that, you know, one of the things that I noticed is that when I say things like decolonization or like, you know, demilitarization or sovereignty is weird. I still don't understand why sovereignty freaks people out. But when I say those things, people get a little kind of standoffish or intimidated. Like, ooh, I don't want to get involved in that. But when I say things like self-government, nobody gets pissed off about self-government. Like, who gets upset about wanting to govern yourself? You know, it's kind of a weird one. No, I don't like oxygen. Thank you very much. It's like freedom, right? Everybody likes freedom. I mean, isn't that what self-government is? The freedom to make a decision for yourself, the right one for yourself, uninfluenced, uninhibited by another. I mean, they seem like kind of basic human principles. But, you know, I think that's the thing that I'm grateful for, that I really appreciate is, you know, the opportunities like this for community conversation. And shout outs to our friends over at Glimpses. Kyle, I will respond to your email, I promise. Kyle emailed me today. It's like, we need help, man. We need to find more support for this show. I appreciate it, Kyle. I appreciate the opportunity. And that's why we're stoked to take this on, you know. And don't get me wrong, guys, this is not, I know I make it look real easy.
They're like, oh, this guy gets to come on here and
I know,
just talk about everything
just
and
blah,
everyone.
habla for 2 hours.
Bola, bala, bola.
Is this guy on the clock? Are you on the clock right now? Yes, I am, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally on the clock because that's a part of our mandate, is to educate the community. And what better way than on talk radio, in a place where talk radio is still valid, still legit, still valued, and still important in our community. I think it's an awesome thing. And I really love this platform. This is one of the, I got to say, this platform has impacted our work in ways that we couldn't have imagined. In such a way that we normally wouldn't have the resources to pull off. You know, it's tough. It's tough, especially with there's 3 of us in the office, guys. We're only supposed to educate like the entire island. And so, like, how many pocket meetings do we got to have? And don't get me wrong, guys, I am game with the pocket meeting. I actually really like the pocket meeting, the village meeting. I think that those are great engagements. It's always good to get face-to-face with people. But, I mean, how convenient is this? You know, can get on the air and just talk shop for 2 hours, and people can passively enjoy it and absorb it. You know, they can listen to it in their ride while they're waiting in line. It's awesome. And they can participate. The number's 922-1051. You can get down. You too can get down. But yeah, going back to the EIS for the missile defense system, you know, one of the fundamental challenges for Guam is our unincorporated territory status and how it puts us in a relationship with the federal government, particularly the military, that's based on consultation and not consent. So there's really no legal obligation for the United States or the Department of Defense to ever seek our permission, our consent for whatever it is that they want to do around here. And it's tough. You know, it's obvious that, you know, the heightened geopolitical tensions between, you know, 2 powerful military nations is of concern for a community like Guam that's kind of smack dab in the middle of this fight and has been in the middle in the past in a global conflict. But there are also undeniable environmental impacts to increases in military activity. And we've seen that, right? We've seen, and you know, what we were talking about with the ICJ to open the show is completely relevant, because there are so many nations like ours, small island nations, that, you know, are just kind of caught in the middle, and we're not involved. We're not involved in the mining of fossil fuels, or, you know, the testing of nuclear weapons, or the possible violent military conflict between 2 large militaries. But, you know, we're in a place where we can't not be impacted. We will inevitably be impacted. You know, we didn't have no beef with Japan, but the United States did. And where was the occupation? Here. You know what I mean? We had nothing to do with it, but you know, we undeniably felt that impact, and it's now part of, you know, our living legacy. And so, you know, when you look at the missile defense system, it's undeniable that there will be environmental impact. The final EIS lists some of the significant impacts as, for example, the removal of 282 acres of limestone forest habitat within various EIAMDS sites. Now, they say that due to the significant loss of 282 acres of limestone forest on Guam, implementation of the potential mitigation measures would not reduce impacts to less than significant. Therefore, impacts on limestone forest would remain as major long-term and significant with limitation of the proposed action. So in other words, we're not going to not do this. We have to do this. The document lists several potential mitigation measures for vegetation and wildlife, including the establishment of 22 potential habitat enhancement sites. This is always the one that gets me, man. Like, hey guys, so we got to like dredge like 100 acres of coral reef. I know it sounds bad, but check this out. We're going to grow some corals, guys. We're going to grow some corals at this other beach. I know we got to like destroy like hundreds of acres of limestone forest, but check it out. Check it out. We got a tree planting next weekend.
We're not that bad.
We're going to plant some trees next weekend, guys. We're going to take a lot of pictures. It's going to be great. We're going to have like musubis. We got like mungy pops. It's going to be great, guys. You should come through. Oh, man. Oh, my dad is like rolling over in his grave right now. Like, stop making jokes about the environment, Melvin. It's not funny. It's not funny, I know. I'm just trying to cover the hurt. Oh, this is what happens when you guys schedule me on the Monday. You get some of the spillover from the weekend. I haven't fully installed the filter back in for the week. I'm still troubleshooting the filter on the show. So the final EIS proposes that there will be 9 missile defense sites over the northern Guam aquifer and water lens, which is the main source of drinking water on Guam. Permitting would be required before construction, and activities would adhere to permit requirements, including water source restrictions and site-specific surface runoff control. And construction impacts would be short and less than significant and don't require potential mitigation measures, according to the final EIS. Again, guys, this is not... We're not the ones who weigh in on this. We're not the ones who assess it. Usually what happens is that the feds will say, okay, we're going to contract this company and they're going to write up all of the potential impacts, and then we respond to it. And I think that that's the hard part, right? Is that we don't have the kind of resources and expertise to just kind of drop everything and respond. Which is tough, right? We want to hear from our people. We want to hear from our experts. What do they think about the impact? But, it's a challenge. I mean, you're over here handling your day-to-day responsibilities, and then, DOD expects you to just kind of like drop everything you're doing because you got, 75 days to respond to this EIS. And if you don't respond, it just means that your silence is consent. That must mean that you're okay with this. Which is just tough, like when we did the build-up EIS, that thing was like 10,000 pages. I'm not even exaggerating. 10,000 pages. And we had 90 days to read it. I mean, ain't nobody got time for that. But if you don't make time for that, then we're complicit, And that's the message that's being sent. It's like, oh yeah, we told them what we're going to do and nobody cared. So We're just going to do it. It must mean that they're all cool with it, which is a totally different thing, right? Like if our consent was being sought, then it's a totally different conversation. But that's why the conversation is not meaningful. It's just kind of like, here's what we're going to do. What do you think? Oh, yeah, we don't really care because, we own this. Ouch. Well, that's just disrespectful and uncalled for, man. Anyway, we got Pete on the line, line 1. Hafaday, Pete. Is that you, my friend Pete?
Yes, sir. I didn't see you yesterday. I was there yesterday.
I knew that was your truck. I knew it. I was on the other side, man.
Okay. I noticed it was mostly tourists, but a lot of them were being brought in by tour companies, and they weren't dressed for the beach.
Oh, yeah, they weren't, man. Nobody got the memo.
They were coming in high heels, dresses and stuff, but they were still going into the water.
Yeah, these tour, because it's irresistible. The tour companies got to do better, man. You need a preface and be like, "Okay, guys, we're taking you to like one of the most beautiful beaches on the island, so dress accordingly."
Right. Well, I think it was just a photo op. They were just there for the photo op.
And they couldn't help themselves. They're like, "I got to get in here, man."
Yeah, this one girl, she looked like maybe she's an influencer or whatever. Anyway, she was doing this sweep. You know how they sweep and do a panorama?
Yeah.
And there's this one, for lack of a better word, bum or, homeless guy. He just went right in front of her and photobombed her panorama.
Don't forget about me, man. We here too.
I was laughing. I was laughing so hard. She didn't look very happy.
It was pretty popping at the beach, I got to say. It was really nice to see, a lot of people out and enjoying that area. It's, it's crazy how long there's been this access program, and there's still a lot of people that don't know that, that you can get access into that beach. Even cooler.
The problem is it closed at 4:00.
Yeah, that's definitely the hard
What's
part.
up with that?
That's the federal regulation. Ultimately, they're still going to maintain control over the property.
I had to threaten my kids with violence because they didn't want to leave.
I am familiar with the feeling. There's a point after the 15th time saying, "Okay, guys, we got to get out." At what point do I have to start using threats?
Yeah, and then the only other thing I would say is, that there's no running water down there. That
it
would be great if they had running water.
I agree.
And, luckily, I always go prepared. I have all my gear and stuff.
Yeah, I bring water too.
And I had water. Yeah.
Yeah, I just realized yesterday that I need to upgrade. Usually, I just take one of the old 5-gallon drinking water jugs. I fill that thing up and then leave it in the back of my truck so it's a little warm. And that's enough for all of us. But yesterday I realized that my 9-year-old uses more than half of that thing. I was like, dang, Nanny, you got the smallest body here and you hardly left any for me, your mom, and your brother. I think I need to upgrade my jug.
Those white 30-gallon jugs are good.
Oh, there you go. That's what I need, the 30-gallon. Are you super cool and you have like the shower spigot on it?
Yes.
I
that
knew
was
you
left over
would.
from Mawar.
Oh, you got one of those. Sweet. That should just be like standard issue for people on Guam. Like you get like an outdoor shower camel or bladder thing. Yep.
Yeah.
That is clutch. That and a butane stove. That's all we need, man. We'll survive anything.
And a pop-up tent, right?
Oh yeah, there you go. Can't forget the pop-up. Pala pala.
But I did go into the water and I saw a few spear fishermen out there, but I was surprised to see how much fish was out there.
Oh man, I'm totally one of these haters. When I see people out there fishing, I'm one of these people that's like criticizing everybody's technique. Like, oh man, you're never gonna get a bite with that stroke, bro. No way. And these guys were out here in zero technique. I was watching them throwing their rod and reel lure out. They just throw it out and they just reel it back in. And every time they reel it back in, they got EE on the line. I'm like, man, there must be a lot of EE on there.
Oh, there was.
Oh yeah, I could see them swimming around. It was great. My girl was having a blast out there. But definitely nice to see people out there, not just beaching and swimming, but fishing. I always kind of get all get all sentimental when I see people fishing in previously controlled property. I'm like, yes, this is what we were meant to do here.
Right. Yeah, man. So it was just like last minute too. We had something to do in the morning. We had a brunch to go to, and then after that, we're like, what are we gonna do? So, hey, let's go down to Letexan.
What an awesome surprise beach trip! Guess what, kids? Yeah. We're going to Letexan. That's like my girl's Disneyland. When she finds out we're going Letexan, she's like, really? Really? Yes.
I mean, why is it that only the outsiders can enjoy our resources? What we need to enjoy it ourselves as well.
I agree, man. I think we do. I agree. I think that more people need to frequent those spaces. I always enjoy it when it's frustrating, right? You go to a beach and all the good shade spots are taken up. And you're like, oh man, it's hard to find a spot. But when you go there to a crowded beach and it's a bunch of local families out and about, you can't really be mad about it. It's just kind of like.
Well, I remember when Tuman was a dirt road,
yep.
2-lane dirt road, and we used to camp out there. Lots of families used to camp out there. There were tons of kamachili trees out
yep.
there down near where the Hyatt was.
Oh, that's the hard part. Tuman Beach just does not have nearly enough trees anymore.
Right.
And like some of those places, some of the hotels, I mean, I get it. You wanna have a yard out there, so you build a little like seawall. But it just shrinks the shore. Now there's like 2 feet of shore because there was a wall put up, and my thing is, if you're going to build the wall, plant a tree, man. Plant a tree. We need trees down there. It's so rough to be down in Tuman when your shade shifts and shrinks to like a foot. And then what? And it's just tough. It's tough to have to where it's standard. You have to bring a pop-up if you're going to go to the beach because you won't survive down there because there's not enough trees. I think that in general of Guam. I think Guam landscaping is in dire need of shade trees. Shade trees change everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we're growing trees.
All right, man. Too bad I didn't see you down there, but I was there.
Next time I'm going to leave a note on your windshield. I knew that was your truck.
All right.
Nice talking to you, Pete. Thanks for calling in.
Yes,
Yeah, man. I really enjoy spots on Guam where there's ample shade. That's one of the things that I think is really missing from a lot of our, we have a lot of really beautiful parks. And like we have the luxury of the beach park. Most places you just got a park. You got a park or you got a beach. Well, the places that do it right got the beach park. And the beach park is just unusable on Guam if you don't have ample shade. Even the pavilions, right? The beach parks that have pavilions, even those pavilions get hot because it's like all concrete. And just having ample shade around shade trees is so clutch. I'm making an investment. I'm totally going to put it out there right now. If you ever go to the Skinner Plaza, you'll notice that there are these little plants that have kind of popped up along the border of the plaza, of the park in the back there behind the museum. If you ever find yourself out there, please be good to those little plants. Those little plants are ephit trees. And we partnered with the Northern Guam Soil and Water District, Conservation District. We got sourced some ephit from Department of Ag, and we planted those ephit trees in there in an effort to create shade for the park. And granted, yeah, they're just cute little ephit juveniles right now. And unfortunately, Reese, you and me won't be able to enjoy that shade. But the kids and the grandkids, they're going to think about us. They're going to think about us when they're sitting under that beautiful ephit tree and there's shade all over that whole park. So we built like rows. We planted them in 2 rows on either side so that it'll create a canopy when it's fully grown. And I mean, I think it's an awesome thing. It's an awesome thing to perpetuate native species. You ever seen a fully grown ephit tree? It's gorgeous. Super gorgeous.
Yes. Well, okay, maybe not full grown, but probably down in the south side. I've definitely seen some ephit trees, and it's really remarkable just
how huge, and then also, of course, everything that we can use for it,
Right.
or with it, rather.
I know, man. Did you know that EFIT is termite proof?
No, I didn't.
It's super awesome. Yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, yeah, of course, many people know EFIT is known because it's a hardwood. It's very, very valuable for wood carvers, for making homes and furniture. But we haven't built homes out of EFIT in decades because there's just not enough EFIT left on the island. EFIT is now, I think it's endangered, if I'm not mistaken. But if you ever get a chance to go down to the Lujan House, the historic Lujan House in Hagatna, it's right over near where the old legislature used to be. Public health is there now, the Hessler building. But yeah, the historic Lujan House has a lot of the structure is built out of EFIT. So the floors are EFIT, the pillars, the railings. It is gorgeous. And it's old. Like it's, the wood looks kind of dry. Like it could definitely use a nice oil rub down. But that's the awesome thing about EFIT. Even when it's like all like super old and dried out, you just oil that thing down, polish it, and it like restores its color. It's beautiful. And it's termite proof. I just think it's awesome that like termites get doffy if they try to eat EFIT. I just think that's an amazing thing. That was always my dream. Like I want my whole house to be built out of EFIT. Can you imagine how much cooler it would be? And that thing would guarantee survive a typhoon. Guarantee. I'll bet money on it. Man, I would love that. That is my dream home. A full house built out of EFIT. Roof, floor, everything. Earthing. The pillars, banisters, all of it. I know that's not like very ecologically friendly. That's why I will instead build it out of recycled plastic bottles. It's on the horizon, guys. They're already doing it. The technology is there. I seen it. I seen the block at the makerspace in the Chamorro Village. I think it only going to cost us like $5 million to invest, which is, I would do it personally. Shoot, man. I would throw down on the $5 million investment to have like recycled plastic bricks from our trash. Come on. How do you say no to that? And it's like just as sturdy as concrete. They look like Lego blocks. This is a cool thing. They totally remind me of Legos. Anyhow, we are at the top of the hour and our time is just about up. I want to thank all of our callers who called in. Actually, our caller, I think it was only Pete, right? Yeah. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for being our caller today. But to all the people who are tuned in to our Instagram live, shout out to you guys over there. Meta and Roddu out there. And then everybody listening on the Wave YouTube and, of course, out in Radio Land. We thank you for tuning in with us. We'll be back for another installment next week, and we look forward to hearing from you then. Have a great day, everyone. Adios.
Great harmony with Discord. This is Soundbites, and I'm Alan Davidson. Gamers know Discord, but there's a lot more to this innovative social media service with a weird name. And much more than just the latest Minecraft hack.
KGUM-FM. Daddy No. The talk of Guam is Wave 105 FM.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Matt Piper. Smoke from Canadian wildfires is still hovering over some Midwestern states, bringing warnings of unhealthy air. Air quality alerts have been in effect in 11 states this weekend, and New York City has already issued one for tomorrow. National Weather Service meteorologist Bob Oravec.
And going forward, it looks like that same general pattern of the flow out of the west-northwest across the northern tier of the country, southern portions of Canada is going to continue for next week or more. So it looks like we're probably going to have more smoke moving from Canada into the northern tier of the United States.
Authorities say a former U.S. soldier suspected of killing 4 people at a Montana bar is still at large and believed to be armed.